Hey everyone. Today we're going to talk about something that I wish someone had told me sooner. Don't wait until your kid asks about sex to bring it up. And I get it. You want to do this the right way. You're probably scared of saying too much, too soon, or too little, too late. Maybe you're hoping school will cover it or that your kid just won't need to know. But let me be clear. Silence is not safety. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. I make content just like this to help parents feel less lost in this crazy modern parenting world. Wherever you're watching this from, whatever time it is where you are, thank you for letting me be part of your day. Now let's listen to the compelling story in this video of mine. I remember standing in the kitchen, slicing apples for my daughter's lunchbox, when she, only 7 years old at the time, asked, "Mom, what's a condom?" I almost dropped the knife. I wasn't ready. I thought I had more time. 7? But there it was. She'd overheard it at school from an older kid, and that was the moment it hit me like a freight train. If I'm not the first one to talk to her about sex, someone else will be. The truth is, we wait. We wait for the right moment, the right age, the right question, but that moment rarely shows up with a calendar alert. Kids are curious long before they have the words to ask. And when they do ask, they're often testing the waters, watching our faces, our tone, our discomfort. If we flinch, they shut down. If we freeze, they learn it's a forbidden topic. I used to think she's too young to understand. But you know what I realized? It's not about giving them everything at once. It's about giving them something, early enough that they feel safe coming back for more later. When she was 5, she asked where babies came from. I fumbled, told her from the belly, and moved on. I missed that as a chance, not to explain anatomy, but to say, "That's a great question. I'm glad you asked me." That one sentence could have opened the door for all the conversations we'd need in the years to come. Instead, I treated it like a landmine. And guess what? She picked up on that. She didn't ask again until 2 years later. And by then, she was more nervous. So was I. I started learning, slowly, clumsily, that waiting for them to be ready was more about me not being ready. The hard truth is, if your child is old enough to ask, they're old enough to start getting real answers. And even if they haven't asked, you should still begin. Start with body parts. Use real names: penis, vulva, testicles, vagina, not cutesy nicknames. If that makes you cringe, unpack that, because your discomfort will shape theirs. Start with boundaries. No one is allowed to touch your private parts except to keep you clean or healthy, and even then, only with permission. Simple, powerful language. Start with safety. If someone ever makes you feel weird or tells you to keep a secret about your body, you can always tell me. I will always believe you. That's not about sex. It's about trust. And it starts early. I used to think safe sex talks had to start in middle school. But honestly, by then, a lot of kids already have access to the internet, unsupervised screen time, or peers with misinformation. If your kid is using a tablet, watching YouTube, or scrolling social media, it's already too late to wait. And still, so many of us are paralyzed by fear. Fear of ruining innocence, fear of planting ideas, fear of being judged by other parents. But knowledge doesn't ruin innocence. Secrecy does. My turning point came the day my daughter brought home a book from the library. It was a cartoon book that explained puberty with honesty and humor. We sat down and read it together. She asked questions. I answered. Some were awkward. Some made us laugh. But after that, she started telling me everything. School crushes, weird things she heard in the hallway, confusing feelings, embarrassing changes. We had a bridge now, and we built it because I stopped waiting. And no, it wasn't perfect. Sometimes I said too much. Sometimes I said the wrong thing. But at least I was in the conversation. If you're thinking, okay, I want to start, but how? Here's what worked for me. Use books, shows, or real-life moments as conversation starters. Ask open questions. Have you ever heard someone talk about that? What do you think that means? Stay calm. Even if you're panicking inside, stay curious. That's interesting. What made you wonder about that? Admit when you don't know something, then promise to find out together. You don't have to give a TED Talk. You don't have to know it all. You just have to show up. And the earlier, the better. Because the more time you have, the more you can shape the tone, not just the content, of how your child understands sex, safety, consent, and self-worth. I waited too long for that first conversation. But I stopped waiting after that, and the difference was night and day. So if you're sitting there wondering if your child is old enough yet, let me gently say, they are. Start small, start awkward, start somewhere, because the best time to start was yesterday. The second best time is today. When people talk about the talk, it always sounds like this one dramatic, awkward sit-down where everything gets dumped on the kid at once. Like we're supposed to deliver a sex ed PowerPoint in one evening, check the box, and move on. But let me tell you something that took me way too long to realize. There is no talk. There's only a series of talks. Dozens, maybe even hundreds, little ones, big ones, random ones in the car, messy ones after school, unplanned ones during a movie or while brushing teeth. And when I figured that out, it changed everything. The first time I tried to have the talk, I cleared the evening, dimmed the lights like we were setting a stage, and launched into this weird monologue about puberty, periods, condoms, and consequences. My kid stared at me like I had grown a second head. She didn't say a word. It was too much, too fast, like trying to drink from a fire hose. After that, I pulled back. I paid attention to her world. When she mentioned a friend who started wearing a bra, I used it. I said, "That's a big moment. Do you feel like your body's changing too?" We talked a little. Then I stopped. Let her lead. That night, she brought up the topic again, on her own. And that's when I knew the best conversations don't happen when you force them. They happen when you plant seeds. Water them. Let them grow. If you treat sex education like a one-and-done speech, you're doing both of you a disservice. Because it's not just about biology. It's about body image. It's about feelings, consent, relationships, power, emotions, identity. All these topics are layered, and no child is ready to digest them all at once. But if you keep the door open, they'll come through it when they're ready. One of the most helpful things I started doing was making conversations normal. Not serious, not dramatic, just everyday stuff. If a song came on with suggestive lyrics, I'd say, "Whoa, what do you think they mean by that?" Not in a judgmental way, more like, "Let's decode this together." If we watched a show where a character was being pressured into something, I'd ask, "What would you do if someone made you feel that way?" I didn't give lectures. I asked questions, and the answers told me everything I needed to know about what she understood and what she didn't. And sometimes she asked me questions. "Mom, what was your first kiss like?" I answered honestly, but appropriately. I wanted her to know I wasn't embarrassed to talk about these things, that they weren't off limits in our home. The more we talked, the easier it got. Here's the thing. Kids don't need one perfect talk. They need many imperfect ones. They need to see you stumble and recover, to hear you say, "That's a great question and I want to get it right. Can we look it up together?" They need to see that even adults are still learning. And they need repetition. You might explain consent 3 times before they really grasp it. You might define a word today and have to revisit it next month. That's not failure, that's learning. I remember once, after a conversation about how babies are made, my daughter came back a week later and asked, "So, do people do that even when they don't want a baby?" Bingo. She was building layers of understanding. She wasn't ready for that question during the first conversation. But because we kept talking, she got there on her own. Also, expect weird timing. These questions won't come when you're relaxed on the couch. They'll show up while you're late for school drop-off, halfway through a grocery run, or stuck in traffic. You'll be tired, flustered, unprepared. But those are golden moments. Don't miss them. Even if you don't have all the right words, respond with this: "I'm so glad you asked." That one sentence teaches your child that curiosity is safe, that you're the right person to come to, that their questions aren't shameful, they're welcome. Here's something else I had to unlearn. I thought I had to be completely calm, wise, and composed in every conversation. But you know what? Kids don't need a guru. They need a parent, one who listens, one who cares, one who keeps showing up, even if they mess up. Sometimes you'll say the wrong thing. Sometimes you'll overshare or underexplain. But if you keep showing up, you'll create a home where it's okay to talk about real things. And that's the goal. Not to deliver one flawless talk, but to build a lifetime of conversations. So here's what I do now. I normalize topics before they become urgent. I talk about bodies, consent, and boundaries regularly. I use books, articles, and real-life moments to start conversations. I admit when I don't know something and show how to find good answers. I create space for both silly and serious questions. I don't wait for the right age. I don't wait for school. I don't wait for awkward silences. I create openings because that's what kids need. Not just answers, but access. Every child deserves a parent who talks to them, not just once, but over and over, in all the messy, beautiful, ordinary moments of life. So the next time your kid asks a weird question, or you hear a lyric that makes you pause, or you see something on TV that feels like too much, use it. Say something. Ask something. Open the door. Because the conversation doesn't happen once. It happens again and again. And every time, you're showing your child that they matter enough to keep talking. I didn't realize how much I was teaching my daughter, not with my words, but with my silence. And that silence? It said plenty. It said, "We don't talk about that here." It said, "This makes me uncomfortable." It said, "Figure it out on your own." The scary part is that kids are always learning. They're watching how we react when they bring something up. They're listening to what we avoid, what we flinch at, what we label as inappropriate. And when we dodge their curiosity, we're not protecting them. We're sending them a message. I'll never forget the time my daughter was maybe 9 and came across a joke in a movie that clearly hinted at sex. She turned to me, curious, eyebrows raised, and I just laughed nervously. Changed the subject, reached for the remote, and she got the message. Don't go there. I didn't need to say the words. My discomfort said it for me. What I didn't understand then was that the absence of information is still information. When you say nothing, kids don't assume it's because you don't know. They assume it's because they shouldn't know. And that's where shame starts to bloom. And here's the worst part. When you don't answer their questions, they don't stop asking. They just stop asking you. They ask Google. They ask older friends. They watch videos. They scroll through comments on TikTok. And the things they find? They aren't designed to protect them. They're designed to shock, to seduce, to entertain, and often to mislead. We think silence protects innocence, but what it really does is create ignorance. And in that vacuum, fear, confusion, and embarrassment grow. I started realizing this when my daughter hit middle school. One day she said to me, "I didn't want to ask you earlier, but is it true that if a boy likes you, he'll pressure you?" My heart broke. Not because she asked, but because she had waited to ask. She was afraid of my reaction. So I asked her, gently, "Why didn't you bring it up before?" And she said, "I didn't think you'd want to talk about it. You always look weird when the topic comes up." Oof. That moment shattered me. Because she was right. I had been weird. Even though I considered myself open, liberal, progressive, I still carried all this old inherited shame. Not because I believed in it, but because I'd been raised in it. Sex was private, taboo, inappropriate for kids, something to be hidden, joked about, or whispered. And it had leaked into my parenting. So I made a decision that day: no more teaching through silence. I sat down with her. I said, "Listen, if I've ever made you feel like you couldn't ask me something, I'm sorry. I want you to know I'll never be mad at you for being curious. I won't punish questions. I'll always try to be honest with you." That changed everything between us. I realized that by saying nothing, I'd unintentionally passed on the message that some parts of her body, some parts of her feelings were shameful, that she had to protect me from her own development. That is not okay, because when we teach kids that some things are too awkward to talk about, we also teach them to keep secrets. And predators rely on secrets. Abusers rely on kids feeling like they can't speak up. And fear relies on kids feeling like their parents wouldn't understand. So I started naming things out loud. I said period without whispering it. I used correct terms for body parts. I talked about consent in everyday language. I didn't always know the right words, but I knew this: saying something was better than saying nothing. One night, we were watching a show together and a storyline hinted at coercion. I paused and said, "That felt wrong, right? Like she didn't actually want to do that?" My daughter nodded. I said, "That's an example of someone not respecting boundaries. Have you ever seen anything like that at school?" She thought. Then she shared something that happened in the hallway the week before. Something I never would have known if I hadn't opened that door. That's what silence robs us of: connection. We think we're keeping things age appropriate. But honestly, the internet doesn't care how old your kid is. Neither do rumors, music videos, or memes. Your kid is hearing things already. If you're not shaping their understanding, someone else is. And that someone may not have their best interests at heart. So now I say things like, it's okay to be curious. I'd rather you learn it from me than from the internet. You can always ask me anything, even if it's awkward. There's nothing wrong with your body, your feelings, or your questions. You don't need to have all the answers, but you do need to be the safest place for your child to bring the questions. So if you've been quiet, if you've dodged, brushed off, or laughed away the topic, it's okay. You can still change that. Just say, I've been thinking, I want to make sure you know you can always talk to me about anything, even the awkward stuff. You don't have to overcorrect. You just have to be available, present, willing, because your child is learning from you, even when you say nothing, especially when you say nothing. So speak up. Say the things you wish someone had said to you. Break the pattern. Replace the silence with trust. That's how we raise kids who are informed, confident, and unashamed. That's how we protect them, not just from danger, but from doubt. One afternoon, I caught my daughter scrolling through her phone, eyes wide, clearly stunned. I asked, "Everything okay?" She hesitated. Then she turned the screen toward me. It was a TikTok, something flashy, loud, with some guy explaining what girls really want in bed. She said, "Mom, is this true?" That moment will forever be burned into my memory because it was the first time I saw just how fast and how aggressively the world was already teaching her about sex before I had even finished the basics. We like to think we can delay these conversations until they're ready, but ready doesn't wait for permission. It shows up in the schoolyard. It shows up on screens. It shows up in ads, lyrics, jokes, YouTube comments, search results. We don't get to decide if our kids are exposed, only how soon we help them understand what they're seeing. And let me tell you, if we don't talk to them early, the internet will do it for us. That TikTok moment became the starting point for a hard conversation. I said, some of the stuff online is made to get attention, not to be accurate. Let's talk about what's real. And we did. Not because I was ready, but because I had to be. Our kids live in a world where porn is 3 clicks away, where songs casually reference choking, rough sex, and domination, often without explanation, where peer pressure is amplified by likes, DMs, and viral challenges. If you're not speaking into that world, you're not preparing your child. You're just crossing your fingers and hoping they don't find the wrong thing first. One study I read said the average age kids are exposed to porn today is 11. That's 5th or 6th grade. For some, it's even younger, accidental or otherwise. And when they see it, it becomes their blueprint for sex. Do you know what that blueprint looks like? It's not about consent, not about pleasure, not about love, respect, or safety. It's performative, often violent, often demeaning. It doesn't teach about boundaries or communication. It teaches silence and submission. And the thing is, kids don't come to us to fact check it. They internalize it. That's why we can't just tell kids don't watch porn or just say no. We have to talk about what they're seeing. Break it down. Ask how it made them feel. Offer alternatives. Say that's not what real intimacy looks like. That's a performance. Here's what's missing. I had to have that conversation earlier than I wanted. And yes, it felt like too much, but she was already seeing too much. And then there are the friends, the ones who whisper rumors on the bus, who pass around phones with shocking videos, who tell your kid things like, everyone's doing it, or you'll be lame if you don't. I remember the day my daughter came home and said a girl at school was bragging about giving someone a special kiss. She didn't even understand what that meant, only that it sounded grown up and powerful. That's what peers teach. Not context, not consent, just social currency. And when your child doesn't have a solid foundation, peer input becomes gospel. So here's what I do now, regularly. I ask, have you seen anything lately that confused you? I say, there's a lot of junk out there. Want to talk about what's real? I make it okay to be honest, even if they've seen something shocking. And when my kid hears something wild at school, I don't panic. I just say, that's interesting. Want to know more about that from someone who cares about you? It's not about demonizing the internet or banning phones, it's about being louder than the noise, being more trusted than the algorithm. Because media isn't neutral. It shapes our kids' expectations about sex, about bodies, about gender roles. If all they see is women being passive and men being dominant, they start believing that's normal. If all they hear is sex equals pleasure without communication, they learn to skip the talking. If no one tells them that real intimacy involves care, choice, boundaries, and mutual respect, they might not even think to ask for those things. I used to think I had to shield my child from all of it, but shielding isn't sustainable. What works better is guiding, being the person they come to after they see something confusing, not the person they hide it from. Sometimes I sit down with her and say, "Hey, there's this song going around. Have you heard it?" And we break it down. What's being implied? What does that teach about relationships? Other times, I let her teach me. What do your friends think about dating? What's something you've heard at school that made you feel weird? It becomes a two-way conversation, not a lecture. If I could offer just one piece of advice, it's this. Don't wait until they're exposed. Assume they already are. Then walk into their world with your sleeves rolled up and your heart open. Be curious. Be honest. Be braver than your own discomfort, because the world is already teaching them. The only question is, will you be part of that education? Your child needs a filter, not an app, but a human one. At first, I made all the classic mistakes. I framed the sex talk like a warning, a checklist of risks: STDs, pregnancy, shame. I rattled off dangers like I was giving her a pop quiz in disaster prevention. And sure, those things matter, but you know what I was missing? Empowerment. Somewhere along the line, we got stuck on the idea that safe sex means scaring our kids into compliance. But fear isn't a good teacher. Fear might make them quiet, but it won't make them smart. It won't make them confident. It won't teach them how to advocate for themselves when it really counts. That's when I started to change the way I talked. I stopped focusing on what not to do and started asking her what she wanted for herself. What kind of person do you want to be in a relationship with? What does it mean to feel respected? How do you think someone should act if they really care about you? These weren't lectures. They were invitations for her to define her values, her boundaries, her power. And let me tell you, it changed everything. Instead of saying, "Don't let anyone pressure you," I'd say, "You're in charge of your body. You have every right to say no to anything, at any time, for any reason. Even if you said yes earlier. Even if it's someone you care about. Even if it's hard." We started talking about what enthusiastic consent sounds like. Not just no means no, but yes should sound like yes. That it should never feel confusing or scary or one-sided. That mutual respect is non-negotiable. I even told her, if you ever feel like you have to go along with something just to keep someone, that's not love. That's manipulation. She nodded, quietly. I could tell she was thinking about people in her life, not just romantic ones, but friends too. This stuff, it translates beyond sex. It's about learning to value yourself in every interaction. And when she asked, "But what if I do want to do something?" I didn't shame her. I didn't panic. I said, "Then your job is to make sure it's on your terms. With someone who treats you like you matter, with full understanding of what could happen physically and emotionally, and with the right protection." We talked about condoms, birth control, STD testing, not because I expected her to be sexually active, but because I wanted her to be prepared if and when she chose to be. Not scared, not ignorant, prepared. I said, safe sex isn't just about avoiding harm. It's about taking care of yourself, emotionally, physically, mentally. It's about ownership. Because the truth is, you can't prevent your child from growing up. You can, however, give them the tools to grow up with confidence, wisdom, and pride in who they are. And that starts by not making sex the villain. I told her, sex can be beautiful, intimate, powerful, but only when it's healthy and mutual and wanted by both people. That's not an easy sentence to say when you grew up thinking sex was dirty or dangerous. But if I wanted her to have a healthy relationship with her body, I had to heal my own relationship with the topic too. We also talked about pressure, not just from partners, but from society, from media, from friends who brag or joke or judge. I told her, people might try to make you feel like you're too much or not enough, like you're supposed to look a certain way, act a certain way, want certain things. But the only person who decides your worth is you. I showed her what it looks like to set boundaries. I modeled consent in everyday ways, asking before hugging, respecting her saying no, reminding her she's allowed to change her mind. We practiced saying no thank you, and I'm not comfortable with that. Even with me. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes I said too much. Sometimes I saw her eyes glaze over. But I didn't stop, because this wasn't about one talk. It was about a culture, one I was building, conversation by conversation. And you know what? She started using that language too. One day, I overheard her telling a friend on the phone, "You don't have to do something just because everyone else is. You get to decide what feels right for you." I smiled. She wasn't parroting me, she was believing it. That's when I knew we were getting somewhere. Empowerment means giving your child the knowledge, language, and self-worth to protect themselves, not just from physical harm, but from self-doubt, from coercion, from silence. It's the difference between teaching your daughter to fear her body and teaching her to own it, to love it, to speak up for it, to protect it, to celebrate it when she's ready. And if you're raising a son, the same rules apply. Teach him that no is a complete sentence, that real strength is kindness, that pleasure should never come at someone else's expense, that his partner's voice matters just as much as his. Because this isn't just about one kid, it's about the future. It's about creating a generation that treats sex not as a taboo or a secret, but as a part of life that deserves care, respect, and truth. So the next time you sit down to talk, try this. Ask how they define respect. Explore what makes them feel powerful. Talk about love, communication, and joy, not just consequences. Let's teach our kids that sex isn't just something to survive. It's something to approach with dignity, clarity, and strength. That's safe sex. That's empowerment. I used to think the goal of all these talks was simply to keep my child safe from pregnancy, disease, heartbreak, regret. But over time, I realized I was building something much deeper and much more powerful. Trust. Not just any trust, the kind that's unshakable, the kind that lasts into adulthood, the kind that means your child calls you from a party when something feels off, the kind that means they tell you they made a mistake, not because they want to be rescued, but because they know you'll listen. That kind of trust doesn't grow out of fear. It grows out of honesty, repetition, patience, time. It grows when your kid sees that you'll sit through the awkwardness, the confusion, the really hard questions, and not flinch. That you're not just there to enforce rules, but to walk beside them through the most complicated parts of growing up. And let me tell you, when your child knows they can come to you without shame or punishment, they will come to you. One night, my daughter sent me a text from the bathroom at a friend's house. It just said, "Can I call you real quick?" I could feel the urgency in her tone. When she called, she whispered, "They're watching something weird, and I feel really uncomfortable." She wanted an excuse to leave, not because she was afraid of getting in trouble, but because she trusted me to help her get out of there safely and without judgment. That was when I knew our talks hadn't just taught her facts. They'd taught her something far more important, that I was a safe place. And I didn't get there because I handled everything perfectly. I didn't say all the right things. I didn't have a script or a manual. I just kept showing up. Every time she opened the door, I stepped through it. Sometimes I was tired. Sometimes I was embarrassed. But I didn't let that stop me, because if I could be brave enough to talk to her about these things, maybe she'd be brave enough to come to me when it mattered most. And that's the magic. The more you talk, the more you normalize. The more you normalize, the more you connect. And that connection, it doesn't just protect your child's body, it protects their heart. I've learned that conversations about safe sex are really conversations about self-worth, about boundaries, about trust, love, and integrity. These talks aren't just about what your child does, they're about who they become. And over time, they'll start to reflect your voice back to you. They'll make choices based on the values you've planted. They'll hear your calm words in the back of their mind when someone tries to pressure them. They'll remember that awkward dinner conversation, the car ride where you didn't freak out, the moment you said, "You can always come to me." They will carry that with them, long after the sex talk is over. Now, when my daughter says things like, I told my friend she doesn't have to go along with something she's not comfortable with, or, I know I'm not ready for anything physical yet, and that's okay, I feel something shift in my chest. Not pride, not relief, something bigger, a deep, quiet knowing that we've built something strong enough to hold her through all the things I can't control. Because the truth is, I won't always be there. I won't be in the room when she's asked to make hard choices. I won't be reading over her shoulder or reviewing every text. But what I will be is the voice in her head reminding her of her worth. And that's why these conversations matter. Not just so your kid knows the rules, but so they know themselves. So here's what I leave you with. Don't wait until your child asks. Start early. Start small. Don't aim for one perfect talk. Aim for dozens of imperfect ones. Don't let silence teach shame. Speak the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Don't let the internet be their guide. Be louder than the noise. Don't lead with fear. Lead with empowerment. And above all, don't underestimate how powerful your presence is. Because you don't have to be a perfect parent to raise a safe, strong, informed kid. You just have to be the one who keeps showing up. Who listens? Who talks? Who loves enough to make the hard stuff easier? That's how we raise children who not only protect themselves, but grow up to protect others too. Finish the script, enjoy listening, and subscribe to the channel to see the next video. Summary and close approx 300 words. So, after all of this, after the long talks, the awkward starts, the middle of the store questions, the eye rolls, the sudden silences, what did I learn? I learned that the sex talk is never just about sex. It's about values. It's about voice. It's about raising kids who know how to stand up for themselves, how to ask questions, how to set boundaries, how to love without losing themselves. And most of all, it's about trust. Because when your child knows you'll answer the hard questions without flinching, when they know you'll listen without judgment, when they know your love isn't conditional on their choices, they come to you again and again. We have to stop thinking of safe education as a dreaded milestone or an uncomfortable checklist. It's a lifelong conversation. It's made up of ordinary moments, quiet reassurances, honest answers, and messy, beautiful attempts to do better than the generation before us. And if you're still afraid you'll mess it up, let me tell you, you will. But if you show up anyway, that's everything. That's what sticks. So talk to your kids today, even if it's awkward, even if it's clumsy, especially if it's overdue, because waiting until they ask is waiting too long. The time is now. And trust me, you can do this. Finish the script, enjoy listening, and subscribe to the channel to see the next video.